Dr. Hannah Kim sat frozen before the monitor, her eyes wide, disbelief washing over her as the live feed played out in cold, horrific detail. New Eden, once the crown jewel of humanity's expansion into the stars, was dying. The lush, green and blue world that had once represented hope, harmony, and progress now blazed like a funeral pyre in the blackness of space. From her small research vessel, Ording, stationed on the moon orbiting New Eden, she had the worst seat in the galaxy, a front-row view of planetary annihilation. "This can't be real," she muttered, hands trembling over her console. Her fingers danced across the interface, trying to gather as much data as possible. Radiation readings were spiking far beyond tolerances. Heat signatures indicated that the very atmosphere was being peeled off the planet like skin from bone. Deep fissures in the crust emitted glowing magma as gravity itself appeared distorted. New Eden wasn't under attack, it was being unmade. Just 3 hours ago, the planet had been home to over 15 million people. It was famous across human space as a shining example of sustainable development. Golden fields of grain waved beside forests of violet-leafed native trees. Clean energy cities were carved into mountainsides, harmonizing with the environment instead of destroying it. It was paradise by any scientific or ecological standard, and now it was burning. The warning signs had been subtle but swift. Communication from the surface had gone silent, a routine maintenance blackout at first glance. But then, sensors detected anomalous energy signatures in the upper atmosphere. Hannah and her team had barely returned to Ording from a surface expedition when the true nature of the threat revealed itself. The enemy came without sound or warning. Dozens of massive jet-black ships materialized from warp space around the planet. Hannah recognized the design instantly: sharp, angular, almost predatory. The Voidborn. Humanity had encountered them 2 years earlier in a first contact scenario that ended in silence. The Voidborn had observed, exchanged brief communications, then vanished without a trace. Many believed they had deemed humanity not worth their time. That theory had just been violently disproven. The captain of Ording had immediately ordered retreat to the system's edge. But Hannah, knowing what this moment meant, had begged to stay, to observe. "Earth needs to see this," she'd said, her voice cold with urgency. Reluctantly, the captain had agreed. What followed would haunt her for the rest of her life. The Voidborn fleet formed a grid pattern around New Eden. At first, there was no visible sign of attack, no missiles, no lasers, just eerie silence. Then, all at once, their ships activated some kind of advanced gravity-based weapon. The effect was cataclysmic. Mountain ranges buckled as if made of clay. Oceans were ripped from the surface into the vacuum of space. The colony's shield network, designed to withstand solar flares and minor meteor strikes, collapsed instantly under the strain. Cities disintegrated before her eyes. Hannah watched helplessly as entire regions of the planet cracked and fell inward. The sky turned to fire. The biosphere, plants, animals, people, was swept away in a matter of minutes. There were no calls for help, no heroic final messages. Only silence, the kind of silence that crushes you. By the 20-minute mark, the entire colony was gone. After the destruction, the Voidborn began deploying smaller craft harvesters of some kind. They scoured the ruins, collecting unknown materials, scanning and dissecting what remained of the crust. Then, just as suddenly as they'd appeared, the fleet vanished. It was methodical, precise, and absolutely merciless. "Transmit everything to Earth," Hannah ordered. Voice hollow. "Maximum encryption. Priority channel." The bridge crew obeyed in silence. No one spoke of what they'd just seen. For Hannah, the personal loss was immediate and unbearable. Her younger sister, June, had moved to New Eden last year. She'd sent a photo just 2 weeks ago of her daughter's 3rd birthday, smiling and covered in frosting. Now, they were gone like everyone else. The transmission reached Earth in less than 3 days, faster than Ording itself could travel. By the time Hannah arrived at Lunar Station, the world had already changed. She was rushed to the surface, to the underground headquarters of the United Earth Defense Council in South Korea. What had once been a strategic command center now buzzed with raw, urgent energy. Alarms blared softly in the background. Screens tracked ship movements and military deployments across human space. Earth wasn't just in mourning. It was preparing for war. In the main briefing hall, Hannah stood before a room full of admirals, generals, scientists, and heads of state. All eyes were on her. At the center stood Admiral Tan Park, a towering presence even at 62. Once the man who unified Earth under one banner, he now carried the weight of a coming storm. His usually stoic face showed something raw in that moment: grief. He welcomed Hannah with a firm nod. "Your data has been extremely valuable, Dr. Kim. Please tell them what you saw." Hannah took a breath, then began. For the next hour, she described every detail: the weaponry, the pattern of attack, the harvesting that followed. She did not allow emotion into her voice. That would come later. She was a scientist, and these were facts, horrific, world-ending facts. When she finished, the room fell into silence. Admiral Park stepped forward again, this time showing a family photo: a woman, 2 teenagers, and a man in agricultural workwear. "My son lived on New Eden," he said quietly. "My grandchildren were born there. They're gone." He turned, his voice now cutting through the silence like a blade. This wasn't a military target. This was an agricultural world with no strategic value. This wasn't a conflict. This was murder on a planetary scale. The room didn't argue. From that moment, something shifted. No longer was Earth debating its next move. It was deciding how hard it would strike back. And as Hannah looked around at the hardened faces now filled with grim purpose, she realized the Voidborn hadn't just destroyed New Eden. They had awakened something far more dangerous than they could ever comprehend. Humanity was no longer looking to survive. It was preparing to unleash hell. Admiral Tan Park stood alone in the observation deck of the United Earth Defense Council's command center deep beneath South Korea. The polished glass wall before him overlooked the massive operations floor below, where hundreds of officers moved with silent, focused urgency. Holographic displays flickered with fleet formations, production schedules, and sensor reports from every corner of human-controlled space. He didn't need a report to know what was coming. He had already made his decision. The loss of New Eden had changed everything. Park's jaw tightened as his eyes traced the image of the ruined planet on the central monitor. 15 million lives, gone in minutes. He had reviewed the recordings himself, frame by frame, and every time he reached the moment when the Voidborn weapons activated, it hit like a fresh wound. He had seen war unified Earth under one banner during the Continental Conflict decades ago, but this was something else. This was genocide. There was no more time for debate. No more time for hesitation. "Open global broadcast," he said, turning to his communications officer. "Secure channels, all colonies, all military installations. Immediate." A few moments later, every screen across Earth's interstellar network flickered, replaced by the stern face of Admiral Park. His white uniform stood in stark contrast to the black backdrop of the command center behind him. His voice, when he spoke, was calm but carried an unmistakable weight. "Fellow citizens of Earth, residents of every colony from Mars to Proxima Centauri, today I speak to you not only as an admiral, but as a father, a grandfather, and a human being." He paused, letting the silence hang for a beat. 3 days ago, we lost New Eden, our most successful colony. It was not destroyed in war, nor lost to natural disaster. It was exterminated. 15 million lives extinguished without warning, without mercy. Park inhaled slowly. "The ones responsible are known as the Voidborn. They are technologically superior. They do not negotiate, and they see us not as people but as resources." He stepped forward, eyes locked on the camera. "They believe we are weak, that we will cower, that we will accept this." A long silence. "Salen, they are wrong." At that moment, Across dozens of worlds, the Council's military AI systems began issuing a single directive: initiate sleeping giant protocol. This directive has never been activated, Park continued. Until now, as of this moment, all civilian manufacturing across human space is repurposed for military production. All shipyards will operate at full capacity. All research facilities are reassigned to defense. We will build an armada the likes of which this galaxy has never seen. His voice hardened. I have promised Earth one thing, that we will never again allow our people to die helpless. I intend to keep that promise. Our goal is simple: 700,000 warships. And we will not stop until every last one is complete. Across the system, the effects were immediate. On Mars, the orbital shipyards that once assembled cargo freighters and science vessels began retooling for war. Torch-wielding engineers tore apart assembly lines to replace them with high-capacity reactors and armored hull bays. Veterans, engineers, and retirees were summoned back into service. Among them was Jun Ho, a 58-year-old master hull fabricator who hadn't stepped foot inside a dry dock in 5 years. He arrived at Mars Shipyard Alpha with a single duffel bag and the fire of purpose in his chest. "How does it look?" asked Sabine, a young engineer beside him, as they inspected a newly forged armor plate. Juno squinted, then pointed to a microscopic seam near the welding line. "If that gives out during combat, 300 people die. You think that's good enough?" Sabine's face flushed red. I'll fix it." "Fix it now," Junho said, his voice not unkind, but firm. "This is war, not an internship." The mood across the shipyards was identical: intensity without cruelty, urgency without chaos. Every worker knew exactly why they were there. Every clank of metal, every arc of welding light carried the unspoken names of the dead. On Earth, luxury factories once devoted to consumer goods were now fabricating ballistic armor and precision weapon mounts. Mining operations on Mercury accelerated, pulling rare metals from its scorched crust at unsustainable speed. Jupiter and Saturn's moons became full-scale fueling stations, their atmospheres siphoned to feed the growing navy. The asteroid belt, once a patchwork of mining outposts, turned into a spiderweb of orbital foundries churning out alloy frames and drive components. From major colonies to tiny frontier outposts, all of humanity moved in a single rhythm: build, train, arm, prepare. Back at command, Park reviewed production timelines and satellite feeds. His aide stepped forward with the latest number. "Initial fleet construction underway on Mars, Luna, Venus, and Titan," she reported. "Projections: 3,200 ships complete within the first quarter." "Not enough," Park said, shaking his head. "Push harder. Expand the shipyard ring around Venus. Convert the mining stations on Titan to construction yard. Use the asteroid belt for raw material refinement." His aide hesitated. "Sir, we're already beyond safe infrastructure capacity." "Then make it unsafe," Park replied bluntly. "They give us no time. We will give them no mercy." In tandem with construction, a new generation of soldiers began to form. Veterans were recalled. New recruits were drafted, but Park knew traditional training would never meet the timeline. That's why he greenlit the Neural Education Program, a once experimental system that uploaded years of tactical knowledge directly into a recruit's brain. Across lunar bases and orbital academies, thousands of pods hummed to life. Office clerks, delivery pilots, teachers, ordinary citizens who had never held a rifle now lay in nutrient tanks, their minds absorbing simulated war experience at 20 times normal speed. 6 weeks in a pod, and a civilian became a weapons officer. 8 weeks, a starship pilot. By the time the first fleet was ready, so would its crew. Meanwhile, at a classified research facility in Antarctica, Dr. Hannah Kim led a different front of the war. Using data from New Eden, her team worked day and night to reverse engineer void-borne tech. They knew humanity's ships could never match the raw firepower of the enemy unless they adapted. So they did. Prototype shield generators designed to withstand gravitational distortion were already in testing. High-output reactors that folded local space-time were under development. Gravity-lance weapons, inspired by what had killed New Eden, were no longer theory, they were blueprint. When Park visited the facility, Hannah looked up from her workstation, dark circles under her eyes. "We're behind," she said. "Way behind. But you're closing the gap," Park replied. She nodded, exhausted but resolved. "We'll have something. Just give me 6 months." "You'll have it," Park said. "But that's all I can give you." Outside the facility, the Antarctic skies burned faintly red as sunrise broke over the horizon. It was a new day, and humanity was no longer looking inward. They were awakening. Across the stars, a sleeping giant had stirred, and it was building war. 3 months after the destruction of New Eden, the war machine of humanity thundered forward. Shipyards blazed, factories roared, and neural training centers filled with new recruits, all driven by one purpose: vengeance. But inside a quiet laboratory deep within a fortified lunar installation, Dr. Hannah Kim was chasing something even more important: understanding. She hadn't rested properly in weeks. Her days blurred into long shifts surrounded by glowing holoscreens, foreign particle simulations, and mineral scans pulled from the ruined crust of New Eden. Her team comprised of the sharpest physicists, cryptographers, and xenologists Earth had to offer worked in complete isolation. No one outside had clearance. The mission was simple, but daunting. Find out why the Voidborn attacked. It wasn't enough to say they were evil or opportunistic. That wasn't science. There had to be a reason, something specific that could explain why New Eden, of all places, was chosen as a target. Why now? Why with such overwhelming force? Then, on the 87th day, buried in comparative crustal analysis from dozens of planetary archives, Hannah found it. She burst into Admiral Park's office on Earth without an appointment, clutching a data chip like it was a live grenade. "Dr. Plum," Park said, surprised to see her in person for the first time in months. "You look like hell." "I'll sleep when we're not next on the list," she said, slapping the chip down on his desk. "We found something." Park inserted the chip. A hologram of star systems, dates, and mineral compositions filled the room. As it cycled through images, a pattern emerged one Hannah's team had traced across more than a century of unexplained planetary extinctions. "These are the real attacks," she explained. 17 planets, none of them human. Most we've never even heard of, small, isolated, some barely beginning spaceflight. Every one of them was destroyed in the exact same way as New Eden. "And this isn't new," Park said, his voice tight. "They've been doing this for generations." Hannah nodded, and all the targeted planets had one thing in common: extremely high concentrations of rare quantum-stable elements. "We're calling them T-series minerals. They're exceptionally rare, highly volatile at standard temperatures, and they have one very important property: they respond to gravity manipulation on a quantum level." Park's brow furrowed. "You think the Voidborn use them for their weapons?" "We're almost certain," she replied. The devices that cracked New Eden's crust, the folding drives that let them cross space in seconds, they're powered by these materials. They don't destroy planets out of hate, they do it for fuel. Park turned away from the projection, staring out the tall window behind his desk. Below him, Earth's military complex churned like a machine, a hive of movement, logistics, and steel. "So New Eden wasn't special," he said quietly. "It was just another gas station." "No," Hannah said, her voice darkening. "It was worse. Because based on their harvesting trajectory, Earth is next." Silence hung between them. She didn't need to elaborate. The implications were immediate. Earth had the largest Q-series deposits discovered to date. If the Voidborn followed pattern, they wouldn't stop with New Eden. Earth, the cradle of humanity, was on a cosmic checklist, and the timer had already started. Park turned back, jaw tight. "How long?" 6 months, maybe less," Hannah answered. "We've cross-referenced resource extraction schedules and stellar drift." "They're coming." Park stared at her for a long time before finally reaching for his secure terminal. "Assemble the War Council," he ordered. immediately. 2 hours later, the command center's high chamber was filled with Earth's top brass scientific minds, fleet commanders, political representatives from the colonies. The urgency in the air was electric. On the main display, Hannah stood beside her team, projecting their findings. "Everything we assumed was wrong," she began. "This isn't a military campaign. It's industrial-scale resource harvesting. The Voidborn are following a fixed pattern, identifying high-yield Q-series worlds, annihilating life, and extracting what they need. They don't see civilizations, they see raw material." She flipped the display to show a planetary cross-section. These minerals form deep underground. They're nearly impossible to detect from orbit without precise gravitational mapping. New Eden had a massive concentration in its western mountain range, exactly where the first gravity weapon struck. It wasn't an accident. The council members murmured, connecting the dots. Park silenced the room with a single gesture and addressed the council. "We now understand the motive behind the attack," he said. "That doesn't change our response, but it makes one thing clear. This isn't a one-time tragedy. This is a process, a system. And if Earth is next, we are running out of time." He turned to the operations director. "Fleet status?" 3,200 ships active, the officer replied. "Another 5,000 coming online within 3 months. At current acceleration, we'll have 50,000 by the end of the year." "Still not enough," Park said without hesitation. "Double production goals, expand shipyards, use the asteroid belt, expand Venus operations, convert Titan into a naval forge if we have to. I want 100,000 ships by year's end." There was a pause, then a voice from the back of the room, General Minho Kang, the youngest flag officer in Earth's history. "Admiral, we can build ships. But what about crews? We're already short on experienced personnel." Park nodded. "I've authorized full deployment of the Neural Education Program. Every qualified civilian will be processed. 6 weeks in a pod equals 3 years of training. By the time those ships are done, we'll have crews ready to fly them." Murmurs of surprise rippled across the room. That tech had been controversial, unproven, risky. But now, necessity left no room for hesitation. Park's voice grew even firmer. "We won't just defend Earth. We'll be ready before they arrive." At the edge of the chamber, Hannah's communicator buzzed. It was from her Antarctic team. "Shield test failure." Again. She closed the message, her expression darkening. Park noticed problems. "We're working against physics," she said quietly. "Their tech still outpaces ours by decades." "Then change the rules," Park said. "Break them if you have to." She looked at him, seeing not just a leader, but a man staring down the annihilation of his species with unshakable calm. Something sparked in her chest resolve. She nodded once. As the meeting ended, and leaders dispersed to carry out 1,000 separate tasks, Hannah paused at the doorway. She turned back to look at the central display one last time, the hologram of Earth, bright and alive, spinning slowly in space. She made herself a silent promise. They might come for Earth, but this time, humanity would be ready. The olive branch moved silently through the darkness of deep space, a gleaming spear of titanium and purpose gliding across the void. Its hull bore the symbols of peace, a white dove, painted beside the flag of United Earth. But for all its diplomatic elegance, the vessel bristled with weaponry beneath the surface. 4 heavily armed destroyers flanked the ship like silent guardians, their sensor arrays scanning every particle around them. The mission might have been diplomatic, but no one aboard was naive. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Jae Young Lee, the most seasoned diplomat humanity had ever produced. 62 years old, sharp-eyed and composed, she had negotiated peace treaties on 3 planets, de-escalated a rebellion on Mars, and built trade routes through disputed mining sectors in the asteroid belt. But none of that compared to this moment. The stakes weren't regional, now they were existential. As she stood on the bridge, clad in a formal uniform adorned with silver accents, she steadied her breath and stared into the star-filled black ahead. Somewhere out there, the Voidborn were waiting. "We're approaching the coordinates," the ship's captain said. No sign of enemy vessels yet. Jae Young nodded. They'll come. They'd been watching since we entered this sector. It had taken months to arrange the meeting. Using fragments of intercepted void-borne transmissions, Earth's linguists and AI decoders had constructed a language framework that allowed for one-way communication. After multiple attempts, a response had finally come. A set of coordinates and a time. Nothing more. But it was enough. Contact, the sensor officer announced. Multiple ships folding into normal space. Bearing 110 Mark III. Everyone on the bridge went still. The space ahead shimmered, bent unnaturally, and then tore open like silk. From within the breach emerged 3 void-borne vessels, enormous, jagged silhouettes of obsidian-colored metal that seemed to absorb all surrounding light. Each one was larger than Earth's dreadnoughts, dwarfing the Olive Branch and its escorts. Their angular hulls pulsed with an eerie internal glow, as if alive. "Our weapons can't penetrate their shields," the captain said quietly. "If this goes sideways, there's no fighting our way out." Jae Young didn't flinch. "Then let's make sure it doesn't." She stepped forward. "Open a communication channel. Begin transmission." A few tense moments passed. Then, the main view screen flickered to life, and a figure appeared. It wasn't what anyone expected. The void-born being was not humanoid. Its form resembled a crystalline lattice, constantly shifting and reforming. Like a living equation, geometric shapes clicked and slid into place across its body, and where a face might be, a cluster of light-emitting orbs pulsated in organized patterns. "I'm Ambassador Lee, representing the United Earth Government and all human colonies," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "We seek explanation and restitution for the unprovoked destruction of our colony, New Eden. 15 million lives were lost." The creature's response came through the translation algorithm. Its voice was flat, emotionless. "Your presence in this region is noted. Your grievance is irrelevant." Jae Young didn't flinch. New Eden posed no threat. It was a peaceful, agricultural world. Your actions were unjustified. "Threat assessment is not relevant to resource acquisition," the being replied. Jae Young's hands tightened at her side. "Those resources belong to us, as do the lives you took. Ownership is a primitive concept used to justify territorial limitation. It has no meaning to the Voidborn. All matter exists to serve our needs." The bridge remained silent. The implications were horrifying. This species had no concept of life as sacred. To them, everything was fuel. Still, she pressed forward. "We propose a treaty, a recognition of sovereign boundaries. We believe coexistence is possible." The being paused, its crystalline form adjusting before replying. "Coexistence is inefficient. Too inefficient. Your species has limited utility. Technological evolution remains rudimentary. You offer no value except as raw material." Jae Young's breath caught, but she recovered quickly. "We are more capable than you believe. We ask only one thing, that you avoid human space in your future harvesting operation." Another pause. Then the lights across the Voidborn's form pulsed again. "Your request is noted and rejected. This communication is terminated." And with that, the screen went dark. "Voidborn ships are folding space," the sensor officer reported. "They're preparing to jump." But Jae Young wasn't finished. "Did we get it?" she asked, turning to the young communications officer. The woman nodded. "Yes, Ambassador. While they were transmitting, we piggybacked on their signal and penetrated their network. Data's transmitting to Earth now." Beneath the Olive Branch's outer hull, a covert sensor array designed by Dr. Hannah Kim's team had been running throughout the meeting. It was never just about negotiation. This had always been a reconnaissance mission. Back on Earth, Admiral Park stood in the war room, watching the stolen data stream across giant displays. His face was stony, eyes scanning every image and timestamp. "It's worse than we feared," said his intelligence chief. The Voidborn have already scheduled harvesting operations for 3 more human colonies: Titan Base, New Horizon, and Proxima Centauri. Park didn't respond at first. His mind was already running scenarios, analyzing risks, preparing timeline. When do they strike? Titan Base in 2 months. The others shortly after. Fleet status? We've got just over 50,000 ships, General Minho Kang replied. Most are light class, but the first dreadnoughts are coming online next week. Deploy them all, Park said. Defensive lines around every target. Nothing gets through. But even 50,000 won't match their tech, Hannah Kim interjected. She had just joined the meeting, her face pale with tension. Unless we use everything. Park's eyes locked with hers. You mean the black box projects? She nodded. Yes, Admiral. It's time. The room went silent. Everyone knew what that meant. For decades, humanity had developed experimental technologies deemed too unstable or dangerous for deployment: gravity weapons, quantum field manipulators, folding drives that play dice with physics. Projects sealed under military black sites. Forbidden knowledge, until now. Park gave the order: unseal the vault. Outfit the fleet. And just like that, the rules of the game changed. Aboard the Olive Branch, Ambassador Jae-Young Lee stared out the viewport, watching the stars swirl past. Her mission had failed on the surface. But deep down, she knew it had succeeded in its true purpose. She had looked into the eyes of a civilization that saw hers as nothing more than ore and biomass. Now, they would see what happened when prey fought back. Space above Proxima Centauri ignited like a dying star. The first wave of Voidborn vessels arrived precisely on schedule, folding out of warp space with terrifying precision. Dozens of angular, obsidian-hulled capital ships slid into orbit around what they expected to be a vulnerable, poorly defended human colony. They were wrong. From his position aboard the U.S. Defiance, Admiral Tan Park watched silently as the enemy fleet emerged. His face, aged and lined with battle-worn experience, showed no emotion. He had been waiting for this moment, planning it for months. Status? He asked calmly. All battle groups in position, his tactical officer replied. Defensive lines are holding at 86% efficiency. Phase 1 underway. Beneath them, the planet's surface sparkled with lights from Proxima's cities. Home to tens of millions of civilians, Proxima had long been considered a backwater colony, distant and overlooked. The Voidborn expected an easy harvest. What they found instead was a fortress disguised as a farm. Park had gambled everything on this plan. After successfully repelling the attack on Titan, his analysts had predicted the next Voidborn target would be Proxima Centauri. Rather than spread their forces thin across the solar system, Park concentrated his fleet here, secretly deploying the bulk of Earth's newly constructed ships to Proxima's orbit. The trap was set. The Voidborn had walked straight into it. A voice crackled through the comms. Incoming message from Dr. Kim. Put her through, Park said. Dr. Hannah Kim appeared on the side monitor, speaking from her science vessel near the rear of the formation. Her team was running real-time analysis of Voidborn tactics and weapon frequency. They're adapting, she said. Their energy patterns are shifting to counter our quantum shields. Park nodded, as expected. Proceed to Phase 2. Across space, human ships responded instantly. Formations dissolved. Standard defense grids broke apart, replaced by erratic, chaotic-looking swarms of agile corvettes and destroyers. The Voidborn command ship, observing this sudden breakdown in order, hesitated. Its core sensors registered what it perceived as a catastrophic collapse of human coordination. It was a lie. This was the heart of Park's plan. Voidborn ships relied on highly advanced predictive battle algorithms, programs capable of forecasting enemy movements with near-perfect accuracy based on logical battle doctrine. The problem? Humans weren't being logical anymore. They were being unpredictable. Small Earth ships began executing reckless maneuvers, rushing enemy cruisers at breakneck speeds. weaving between enemy fire, then vanishing behind debris field. It wasn't suicide, it was strategy. Every move had been drilled, rehearsed, fine-tuned in simulation rooms back on Luna Base. On the US Thunderfall, Captain Minute Suchoi gritted his teeth as he ordered his destroyer straight toward a Voidborn cruiser 10 times its size. "Brace for proximity maneuver," he shouted. The ship accelerated, its hull groaning under stress. At the last possible second, Minute activated an experimental phase shift drive. The vessel momentarily existed in 2 spatial locations, passing through the alien ship's hull while releasing synchronized internal charges. As Thunderfall reappeared on the other side, the Voidborn ship erupted from within. It wasn't just clever piloting. It was a message. They thought we were primitives. Let's show them what primitives can do when they stop playing fair. Throughout the battle zone, human tactics shattered the enemy's expectations. Small attack groups harassed Voidborn dreadnoughts from multiple angles. Stealth ships jammed communications. Shield frequencies were rotated every 30 seconds, preventing enemy lock-on. On Dr. Kim's science vessel, every success was recorded, every failure cataloged. "We've confirmed it," she radioed to Park. "The Voidborn ships are partially organic. The pilots aren't flying the ships, they are the ships. The crystalline entities we negotiated with are integrated into the vessel systems." Park's eyes narrowed. "So, if we destroy the ship, we destroy the being," Kim confirmed. Park turned to his weapons officer. "Prepare the Sun Fort." The Defiance's most powerful and secret weapon had never been used in combat. The Sun Forge wasn't just a laser or missile system. It was a spatial tunnel device, an array that could open a direct conduit between a warship and a star's core. It could deliver stellar plasma at point-blank range. "Target, enemy command ship," Park ordered. "Sunforge charging at 60, 80, 100, target locked. All ships in Sector 4, clear the zone." Human vessels scattered, revealing a direct line between the Defiance and the largest Voidborn vessel. "Fire!" The front of the Defiance ballooned open, revealing a blinding core of white-blue light. A tunnel of space connected the warship to Proxima Centauri's star for a fraction of a second, just long enough for a blast of solar plasma to cross millions of miles. The Voidborn command ship didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist. Back on the Defiance's bridge, the tactical officer's voice cracked with disbelief. "Command ship destroyed. Enemy fleet is hesitating. Their formation's breaking." Dr. Kim's voice broke through again. "We're detecting massive surges in their internal network. It's fear. Their organic components are panicking." Park seized the opportunity. "Broadcast this message on all channels. Translate it into Voidborn language pattern." He stepped forward, facing the camera. "This was one small demonstration of what we are capable of. Retreat now, or be annihilated." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the Voidborn ships began folding space around themselves, vanishing from the battlefield. "They're retreating," the tactical officer confirmed, stunned. "Sure, we did." Park allowed himself a small exhale, then he raised his hand. Silence. "This is one battle. The war isn't over." Hours later, the battlefield was quiet. Among the wreckage, salvage crews picked over the ruins of destroyed ships. The price had been steep: 47 human ships lost, thousands of lives. But it was a victory. A message not just to the Voidborn, but to the galaxy. We are not helpless. In the command room of the Defiance, Park stood beside Dr. Kim, reviewing battle footage. "They underestimated us," he said. "They thought they were harvesting another primitive species." Kim nodded. "Instead, they stirred a hornet's nest." Park looked out the viewport, where ships moved like ants, helping the wounded and repairing damaged vessels. "Next time they come," he said, "we won't just defend." He turned, his voice hardening. "We'll bring the fight to them." The war had entered a new phase. 6 weeks after the turning point at Proxima Centauri, the once fractured species of Earth moved as one. Shipyards across the solar system produced warships around the clock. Training centers on Luna, Mars, and Titan ran neural immersion programs 24 hours a day. The black box technologies once locked away in vaults were now active and deployed across every fleet division. Humanity was no longer simply defending itself. It was taking the war to the Voidborn. Their first target lay 40 light-years from Earth, a known resource hub used by the Voidborn to refine harvested elements from destroyed worlds. Intelligence gathered during Ambassador J. Young Lee's failed diplomatic mission had pinpointed the facility. It was time to strike. When Admiral Tan Park's fleet emerged from folded space, they found the facility lightly defended, no more than 24 cruisers orbiting a massive ring-shaped space station set against the pale light of a red dwarf star. It should have been a bloodbath. But the moment the human dreadnoughts unleashed their new gravity lance weapons, the defenders scattered. The entire outpost was taken in less than an hour. But the real shock came after the breach team stormed the station. Thousands of alien life forms were discovered inside, none of them Voidborn. They were from worlds humanity had never encountered before, insectoid beings with gleaming carapaces. Serpentine creatures with 6 arms. Tall, furred bipeds with eyes like molten gold. They were workers, prisoners, survivors. Dr. Hannah Kim, now acting as chief scientific and diplomatic liaison, stood in the station's hangar bay as the aliens were led out of containment. They didn't resist. Many looked confused. Some looked broken. And a few, as she quickly noticed, looked hopeful. She stepped forward, translator device in hand. "We are humans," she said clearly. "We are not here to conquer. We're here because we fight the Voidborn. You are free." A tall insectoid stepped forward from the crowd, tapping its front legs together in a gesture of acknowledgement. "We are the Exanti," it said, its voice layered and musical. "Our world was harvested 8 cycles ago. Those who lived were brought here to serve." Kim felt something deep in her chest tighten. "You're not alone anymore." Across the station, similar scenes played out. Engineers and security officers escorted entire populations of former prisoners to medical bays, food stations, and temporary housing units. Alien children clung to exhausted parents. Some cried, others simply stared at the humans, uncertain whether this was real or another form of captivity. But word spread quickly. Within days, messages of resistance flared across Voidborn territory. Suppressed species who had served under the boot of exterminators for centuries began to rise up. Sabotage crippled mining operations. Cargo shipments vanished. Outposts went dark. The myth of Voidborn invincibility was collapsing, and humanity was at the heart of it. At Earth's central command hub, Admiral Park watched encrypted transmissions from dozens of sectors. Each showed footage of alien rebels, some wielding stolen Voidborn equipment, others using improvised weapons striking back. "The strategic value is enormous," said General Minho Kang, standing beside Park. "Every uprising ties down Voidborn ships. We don't have to fight." Park nodded but said nothing. His eyes lingered on a grainy image of an aquatic species blowing up a Voidborn refinery using repurposed mining gear. The image shifted again, this time showing 3 species standing side by side beside human marines, all saluting the same flag. A new symbol was taking shape in the galaxy. Not of conquest, but of shared survival. The real test of this growing coalition came 4 months later at what was believed to be the central Voidborn command station, a massive rotating complex orbiting a dying neutron star. Sensors estimated at least 300 Voidborn vessels in the area, the largest fleet humanity had yet faced. Park and his coalition commanders, representatives from 7 newly liberated species, met in real time via HoloLink aboard the US Retribution. Their battle plan would be risky, complex, and unlike anything the Voidborn had seen before. The Mel, a species of stealth-adapted gas dwellers, would disable the station's long-range sensors. Human heavy cruisers and dreadnoughts would engage the bulk of the fleet. Meanwhile, Zanti engineers, small, quick, and highly technical, would infiltrate the station through forgotten maintenance tunnels and sabotage the power core from within. The battle raged for 3 full days. Ships on both sides were torn apart. The space around the neutron star glittered with wreckage and plasma trails. But in the end, the Coalition emerged victorious. The Voidborn station collapsed into itself as the sabotaged core detonated, creating a gravitational implosion that tore nearby enemy vessels apart. Inside the burning ruins of the command center, Park and Kim stood side by side, facing what remained of the Voidborn's central intelligence, an enormous crystalline entity fused into the control structure, flickering and fragmented. "You have broken the cycle," it communicated, voice echoing directly into their mind. "For 900 years, we harvested without resistance. We did not believe resistance was possible." Park stepped forward, fists clenched. "You believed wrong." "Existence is resource management," the being replied. "The strong consume the weak. This is the universal law." Kim shook her head. "Then it's time to write new laws. Coexistence, cooperation, peace." The crystal dimmed. "These concepts have no meaning to us." Park's voice hardened. "Then learn, because the alternative is extinction. Not from us alone, but from every world you've ever stolen from." He gestured toward the viewport, where ships of a dozen species now floated in formation. "They're waiting for one order. I give it, and the station is ash, along with your entire species." It was a pause. Then the light within the entity shifted. "The collective is divided. Some of us recognize the need for adaptation. Then start adapting," Park said and turned away. Weeks later, aboard a neutral space station constructed near the center of known space, representatives from 27 species gathered. Among them were humans, the newly freed Zanti, and even a delegation of the Voidborn, now fractured but willing to negotiate. Together, they signed the first interstellar peace treaty. No more harvesting. No more planetary extermination. All species would be given the right to grow, to evolve, and to defend themselves. A new galactic council was established to ensure the rules would be upheld and to offer protection to civilizations not yet capable of defending themselves. 6 months after the treaty was signed, Admiral Park stood beside Dr. Kim in the observation deck of the council's chamber. Outside the station, ships from dozens of species moved peacefully through traffic lanes, docking ports, and orbital relays. "When we launched 700,000 warships," Kim said, "I worried we might become the monsters we were fighting." "We didn't," Park replied, "because this was never about vengeance." She looked over. "Then what was it about?" He gestured toward the chamber where a new council session was beginning. At its center sat a small, wide-eyed species from a pre-spaceflight world. They had been the next target, according to Voidborn records. "Justice," Park said. "And a promise kept." He turned back to the viewport, watching a U.S. Guardian-class cruiser escort a ship filled with refugees from yet another liberated world. "New Eden is gone," he added. "But its legacy just helped save a galaxy." And for the first time in generations, the stars felt just a little bit safer. The sky above the dying star boiled with fire and radiation. Orbiting it, wrapped in layers of hardened obsidian and crystalline shielding, was the Voidborn Central Command, an immense station the size of a small moon. It pulsed with cold precision, its angular limbs extending like a metallic spider, coordinating what remained of the Voidborn fleets. It was here, in the fading light of a neutron star, that the war would be decided. Admiral Tam Park stood aboard the U.S. Retribution, Earth's largest warship in the heart of humanity's newly unified coalition. Around him, representatives of 12 alien species free from Voidborn oppression stood beside their human allies, armor gleaming under the bridge lights. No one needed to speak. Everyone knew what came next. It was the final offensive. "We've confirmed target parameters," said Dr. Hannah Kim, now serving as the head of scientific and tactical intelligence for the coalition. Central Command controls roughly 63% of void-borne operations across known space. If we take it, their entire coordination grid collapses. Park gave a single nod. Then we ended here. The assault began with the Mel. Ethereal beings adapted to gas-giant atmospheres. The Mel deployed cloaked stealth ships laced with phased neutrino shielding. They slipped silently past void-borne sentry arrays and disabled long-range sensors. Without warning, the void-borne found themselves blind. Moments later, Earth's heavy cruisers and dreadnoughts emerged from folded space, 70,000 ships in formation, flanked by coalition strike wings. Gravity lances, plasma torpedoes, and pulse cannons lit the darkness, tearing into the outer defense grid. The Voidborn responded instantly, their own fleets emerging like shadows, hundreds of vessels shaped like blades and thorns, each one piloted by fused, crystalline intelligences. In the chaos, small, agile infiltration pods launched from the human side, each carrying Xanti engineers, insectoid allies with unmatched technical expertise. Their mission: sabotage the station's power core. Inside the Retribution, Admiral Park coordinated the assault with calm efficiency. Sector 8 collapsed their flank, redirect reinforcements to the southern vector, and keep the extraction lanes open. On a nearby screen, the battle roared, dozens of ships breaking apart, explosions scattering debris like falling stars. "It's holding," said Menho Kang, now promoted to general and Park's closest battlefield strategist. "Their fleets are stronger, but they're disoriented. The coordination they're known for? Gone. That's because they didn't expect us to fight like this," Park said. "They never believed we could." Meanwhile, Dr. Kim monitored the station's readings from a command terminal behind him. Her screen pulsed with spikes of heat and radiation. "Santi teams are inside the power core chamber," she reported. "Beginning overload procedure. Estimated detonation 15 minutes. Park gave a small nod. "Pull out our forward unit. Prepare for collapse shockwave." But before that order could be fully executed, something unexpected happened. A new energy spike appeared at the center of the Voidborn station, unlike any they'd seen before. The view screen shifted. At the heart of the station, encased in shimmering crystal and mechanical lattice, a colossal entity stirred. Shaped like a geometric sphere of interlocking segments, it radiated a mental field so intense it silenced the bridge. And then it spoke. Not aloud, but directly into their minds. "You have broken the cycle," the voice echoed. "For 9 centuries, we harvested without resistance. No world defied us. No voice rejected the law." Park didn't flinch. He stepped toward the display. "Your law is over," he said. "You took our people, our homes. You consumed entire species like they were nothing. That ends now." "Existence is governed by consumption," the entity replied. "The strong endure. The weak are fueled. This is the truth of the cosmos, Dr. Kim's voice cut in, sharp and unwavering. "No, that's the truth you chose. But the universe is wide and there are other ways to live. You just never had to consider them." The entity's light pulsed. "Peace, alliance, these words have no meaning to us." Park narrowed his eyes. "Then learn them, because if you don't, extinction is next. Not just from us, but from every race you enslaved, every world you desecrated. We're not alone anymore." He gestured toward the viewport, where ships of all shapes and colors now flew in formation. Reptilian craft, sleek aquatic vessels, humming gravity-driven platforms, they had all come for this moment. "You threaten the Voidborn with annihilation? I offer you a choice," Park said. "Adapt or fall." There was a long pause. Then the being's energy flickered as if uncertain. "The collective is divided. Some perceive change as survival." Park exhaled slowly. "Then you've got a chance. Don't waste it." In the hours that followed, the central command station was secured. Xanti saboteurs deactivated the core before detonation. Coalition ships moved in to take control, and for the first time in nearly a millennium, the Voidborn rulers of unchallenged dominance stood still, their fleets scattered, their command structure fractured, their fear visible. On the bridge of the Retribution, Park and Kim stood in silence, watching the wreckage drift. Dozens of Allied ships had been lost, thousands of lives. But the price had bought something far greater than victory. It bought a future. Weeks later, on a new neutral station orbiting a twin star system, the first Interstellar Peace Summit convened. Representatives from 27 species gathered: humans, Xanti, Mel, Gauche, and yes, even a delegation from the Voidborn, now fragmented but willing to listen. No longer the unchallenged overlords of space, they entered the chamber as equals, or at the very least, aspirants. The treaty was signed in silence and witnessed by every habitable world in known space. No more harvesting. No more harvesting. No attacks on developing civilizations. A council of species to govern conflict resolution and mutual development. It was the beginning of a new age. 6 months later, Park stood once more in the council chamber's observation wing. Dr. Kim joined him, holding a steaming mug of tea. Outside, ships of every kind moved in peaceful rhythm, no longer tools of war, but instruments of protection. "I didn't think we'd get here," Kim admitted quietly. "Neither did they," Park replied. "That's why we did." She looked up at him. "When you gave that ultimatum, I thought you were bluffing. Would you really have ordered their extinction?" Park was quiet for a moment. Then he answered, "If they had forced our hand, yes. But I was hoping they'd see what I saw in the eyes of every survivor we rescued, something the Voidborn had never faced before." "What's that?" Kim asked. He smiled faintly. "The will to live free." As the council session opened behind them, a small pre-spaceflight species was brought into the chamber. Just months ago, they'd been next on the Voidborn's list. Now, they had a seat at the table. And in the quiet between stars, something shifted forever. The galaxy wasn't ruled by power anymore. It was led by purpose. 6 months had passed since the guns went silent. The last Voidborn cruiser had fled into the distant reaches of uncharted space, and with its retreat came an unfamiliar stillness. No more harvesting beams splitting atmospheres. No more colonies falling under waves of gravity-laced weapons. For the first time in centuries, the stars held peace. But peace wasn't passive. It had to be built, crafted from the wreckage of war and the raw courage of those who survived it. Admiral Tan Park stood in the newly constructed Galactic Council chamber, high above a neutral world orbiting twin suns. The chamber, a circular structure of transparent alloy and adaptive shielding, floated silently in orbit, its design contributed by 12 different species, some once hunted, some once enslaved. Now, they sat together in shared purpose. It was history in the making. Dr. Hannah Kim approached, her presence as familiar as his own shadow. She carried a data tablet in one hand, a simple mug of coffee in the other. "They're all here," she said quietly, glancing through the viewport. Outside, hundreds of vessels drifted peacefully, sleek Earth-built cruisers, orb-like aquatic ships from the Re and the bio-woven lattices of the Xanti. All information, but none on alert. For the first time in galactic memory, Park replied, "No one's aiming a weapon." She smiled faintly. "Feels unreal." "It should," Park said. "But it's real, and it's ours." Inside the chamber, the session began. A human woman recently elected by unanimous vote stepped up to the central podium. Her voice rang clear and strong, but her expression bore the weight of loss. Her family had perished on New Eden. "My name is Leona Miles," she began, "and I stand here not as a leader of Earth, but as a representative of all who believe in coexistence." She turned slowly, making eye contact with every delegation. 600 million lives across known space were lost to Voidborn harvest. Entire civilizations were erased for their minerals, their position, their potential. That cycle is over. No one clapped. This wasn't the time for celebration. Only stillness. This council is our promise, Leona continued. A vow that no developing world will face annihilation alone. That no species will be judged by its current strength, but by its right to grow, to live. She paused. The war has ended. But our responsibility has just begun. After the session, Park and Kim returned to the observation deck, the hub where they once coordinated strikes, evacuations, countermeasures, and now treaties. Do you ever wonder, Kim asked softly, what we would become if New Eden hadn't burned? Park took a moment before answering. We were divided, competitive, complacent. New Eden didn't just die that day. It woke us up. She nodded. It united. But I was afraid that unity would fade with victory. It hasn't, he said, because it was never about revenge. She looked at him, brow slightly raised. Then what was it about, Tan? He motioned toward the window. Below them, in a small delegation bay, a group of wide-eyed beings stood nervously on the tarmac. They were small, barely 4 feet tall, thin limbs, large, expressive eyes. Their skin shimmered with faint bioluminescence. They were from a pre-spaceflight civilization, and until recently, they had been marked as the next void-born harvest target. We fought for them, Park said quietly. In every world like theirs, we fought so the next species wouldn't have to. Kim followed his gaze, watching as human officers gently escorted the delegation inside. New Eden's gone, Park said, but its legacy isn't destruction. He turned to her, voice resolute. It's this. All across the galaxy, that legacy had taken shape in steel, fire, and hope. The 700,000 ships once built for vengeance now served a higher purpose. The Guardian Fleet, as it was now called, patrolled the edges of developing systems not to dominate, but to defend. Crews drawn from dozens of species stood side by side. Former rebels had become commanders. Scientists became protectors. And Earth, once a lone voice in the dark, had become the center of a new kind of power, not through fear, but through trust. On a former Voidborn outpost now converted into a galactic communications hub, Kim stood before a cluster of newly liberated species. They'd only just learned what the stars held beyond their own skies. You're not alone anymore, she said, offering them the same words she once gave to the Azanti. We've built something together, and it's here for you too. One of the beings, a serpentine creature with iridescent scales, lifted its head and spoke in halting English. We thought resistance impossible. Kim smiled gently. So did we, but we changed the rules. Back in Earth orbit, the U.S. Retribution prepared to leave dock for the first time since the treaty was signed. Park stood on the bridge, surrounded by officers from 8 different species. He felt older now, slower but not weaker. His final mission wasn't war. It was to ensure peace would last. All systems green, his exo reported. Fleet on standby. Park nodded and activated fleet-wide comms. All hands. Today we begin the next chapter of this journey. Not with rage, but with resolve. His voice carried through every deck, every ship, every outpost bearing the Guardian insignia. We were forged in loss, tempered by fire, but we did not let that fire consume us. We shaped it. We used it to build something stronger than vengeance. He paused, letting the silence speak. A future. The fleet jumped into folded space, bound for the edge of a system that had recently come online with first contact signals. Not to conquer, but to welcome. And so the giant that had once slept on Earth's surface now watched over the stars, not with fists raised, but with open hands. With every ship launched and every world protected, the memory of New Eden lived on, not in anger, but in the alliance it inspired. The galaxy would never be the same. Because once, humanity had been prey. Now it was the guardian of those still learning to stand.